listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. Roger Gewolb is joining me right now. We had a little trouble connecting last week when we usually talk to him. But Roger, you know, it seems to me that since George Floyd, but more recently since the October 7th attacks, there's been a lot of protests all around the world in major cities. And it's kind of culminating this week with what we're seeing in California. And there are groups here in the United States that are planning a day of rage this Saturday where they're going to have protests all over the country because it's the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. They're going to have a parade, and they're calling it a king parade. The people that hate Trump think he's trying to be king, and so they're going to organize these protests. Your thoughts just looking at it from where you are, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's happening where you are.
I just think it's what word do I want? Silly.
Yeah.
I think it's just a total waste of energy. I mean, these people, if they didn't have this particular issue, they'd find something else. They just want to get out and vent their anger and their frustration. And that is with the way we older people have screwed up the planet for them, and all this talk about, they cannot have lives as rich in many different senses as their parents, and they're the first generation to suffer that, and all this frustration coupled with that's what happens when young people get to this age. It happened with Vietnam. I guess you can go back in history. It's the juices flow, and this kind of stuff comes out, and they find something to protest about, and it's very often upside down, inside out, and backwards, and that's certainly the case here.
And I think, too, that it also is amplified by the fact we have social media. I mean, you're right that these kinds of things have gone on in every generation. Every young generation thinks they have it worse than their parents did, and that somehow they've been cheated. Now, I would be willing to bet that the Depression and World War II generation, didn't think, thought their parents had it easier, too, but they actually did have it easier, So.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would make a couple of observations that I do utilize from time to time. The first one, I'll give you three quickly, if I may. The first one is that I just wonder what kind of crowds would have been out on the street yelling F the Jews and, free Palestine. I mean, it would be a different subject, but what kind of crowds would be out there on those nights that Britain flattened German cities? It just didn't give a darn about who they killed. They flattened every building with everybody in them. And what would they say about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but if there had been, you're quite right, social media and television, live television as we have it today, back then, can you imagine the protests that there would be? And then the third thing I say is that, picking you up on your point there, when I get into discussions like this, Martha, I frequently pull out a few paragraphs which talks about the world today and the sad state, the deterioration of the infrastructure, crime, the youth, the lazy, brazen, stupid youth, the uncaring, unloving nature of people, the selfishness, how bad the world is. And I mean, it's like last night's news from the papers, but at the bottom of the page it says Ovid, the Art of Love, 600 BC. So.
No, it's absolutely true, right? It's that this is just the way it goes. And it's sad to see. And if you look at our history, every time, there's a lot being made about the fact that presidents called out the National Guard even when he wasn't asked by the governor. But there's several other instances in our history, all of them Democratic governors, all of them governors that didn't want to enforce federal law throughout the civil rights movement, when Eisenhower had to call out the National Guard and Kennedy and Nixon at different times had to call out the National Guard. In every case, it was a Democratic governor, a Democratic Party governor that would not follow federal law. And
absolutely. And he calls him a deranged president. I mean, Newsom is deranged. He's destroyed California.
He's destroyed California. California used to be like a great place. And what was great about California is that in the, right after the war, the post-war era, it was probably good before that, but especially in the post-war era, you could go there, you could make it as a person in the middle class, you could make it as a person in the upper class. There were good jobs at all levels, right? All levels in California.
Yep.
Everybody did well, and the weather was good. It was great.
No, you're right. That was its golden age. That was its golden age.
It was the golden age. So for you this Saturday, you're going to have something called Trooping the Color, which is the celebration of the King's birthday. It was the Queen's birthday before that. And so you've got a little different thing. Do you worry that that's going to be, because they're talking about protests all over the world? Are you dealing with a lot of protests still where you are?
We still have the Palestine protests with regularity. There are nothing on the level of what's going on in L.A., of course, at the moment. But we certainly have had our share of riots. It could burst out. It could blossom any time. I'm sure the security for the Trooping of the Color is just super strong. I'm sure they expect trouble, because that's a great place for people to go and make trouble. And it is a beautiful ceremony. And as you know, and as you've said yourself many times, nobody does it like the Brits. So it'll be wonderful, and I just don't think they'll let it be interrupted with. They'll probably have so many police and so many troops there that anybody starts up, they'll be quickly and quietly whisked away.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
never to be heard from
again. Yeah, really. So, I think, kind of getting back is that President Trump is actually keeping his promises. If you can separate the signal from the noise, you can really see what's happening. And right now in America, the most reasonable voice out there is Donald Trump. And if
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
It's all strategy.
Yes,
it's all strategy.
It's all strategy.
And the man knows how to work a room, and America is the biggest room he's ever worked.
Amen to that. Roger Gewolb, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Martha.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Michael Levine is here with me today. He lives in Los Angeles, but not where all the riots are happening. It's our normal time to talk to him, and Lord knows LA's back in the news again.
Here we go, Martha. Yet again.
It's funny because it goes back. You got a long history. You got Ronald Reagan sending in the National Guard to Berkeley back in the 60s. You've got, of course, Rodney King riots. You've got the Watts riots. You've got all these kinds of things that have happened. But this seems different to me because it seems to me, and it was revealed by the California State Assembly, that something like $100 million has been diverted from the California budget to help these groups that are now placing siege on the city, which is crazy to me.
Yes, but maybe the richer question is not whether it's crazy to you, but is it surprising to you?
No, it's not right now with how California.
An interesting question.
Yeah, how California is being run right now, and you just kind of juxtapose it with what just happened in New York earlier this morning when the mayor and the head of the police department got up and said ahead of this supposedly Saturday they're going to have riots all over the country. They said, it's not going to happen here. And if you step out of line, we're going to arrest you. And that's what they seem to not be able to do in the 1-2 punch of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass.
Correct. They don't want people arrested. These Miss Bass, Mayor Bass, and Governor Newsom actively support these rioters posing as protesters. They do. And so if somebody that you heard earlier said they're pouring gas on this flame, they're absolutely correct. They're giving them the wherewithal, the encouragement. And, of course, if you think about this from a national or international perspective, how does this make our city look? What message does this convey to every person thinking of visiting Los Angeles this summer, or at all, or during the Olympics? Is this a good look? Of course not. And what does it make Los Angeles look like, or America for that matter, to the rest of the world? It's a disgrace. It's nauseating what's going on. It's not surprising in the least. For 25 years, Martha, or more, maybe more, we have allowed, both political parties have allowed illegal immigrants to come into this country. Certainly Joe Biden did more damage in 4 years than all the other presidents combined by a factor of 10.
Yeah.
There's no question. President Joe Biden is the Babe Ruth of illegal immigration. And it's nauseating. And when people allow this for 25 years, a problem to exist, like a cancer, if you will, one shouldn't be surprised that this is the consequence. So...
Now, you went from New York to California like a lot of people did in the 70s, right?
I did.
Yeah.
1977, September 16th.
Yes. And so I'm sure there was a long period of time that it was like this Mecca, this great place to live.
It was paradise.
Yes.
It was California dreaming, to use the Mamas and the Papas song. Paradise.
And so when you say 25 years, and I think you were talking about immigration, but when did you see the changes start to happen?
And by the way, changes are slow at first, right?
Yes.
So you don't notice it at first unless you're paying very careful attention. And I would say 30 years ago, perhaps, you would start to see little tiny embryonic signs of problems. You'd start to see in stores more signs in English and Spanish. You'd start to see little things. And of course, life accumulates. If you take a problem, any problem at all, and you ignore it, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, well, the problem grows, doesn't it? It sends a signal, a psychic signal, to the illegal immigrants. You can come. It's fine. We're not going to do much, if anything. And then we'll start to accommodate you. We'll start to change our signs. We'll start to give driver's license tests. We'll start to change our auto recordings when you call City Hall. And so it built over years and then over decades. And then 1 became 2, 2, 4, 4, 8, 8, 10, 12, 16, 20. And then, you would literally drive by any Home Depot in Los Angeles, and there would be a dozen or more illegal immigrants outside willing to work. And I'm not suggesting for a moment these illegal immigrants are all bad people. They may very well be nice people, but they broke the law. And we did not enforce the law, so we shouldn't be surprised that this problem accumulated to a boiling point that it's now at. And, of course, Joe Biden was the
catalyst.
Oh, the final straw.
Yes.
By sure. And by the way, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the entire Democratic Party stood by for 4 years, said nothing. I mean, it's easy to, of course, blame Joe Biden, but Miss Harris was, top on the list of people who did nothing.
Well, and honestly, you and I talk to people all the time. Yep. I know a lot of people. Gainesville has had a very large Latino population for more than 30 years. I know a lot of people who immigrated here, some legal, some illegal. But what you hear overwhelmingly is they don't like these criminal illegal immigrants because it makes them look bad. Okay, so they want just as much for this stuff to get cleaned up as anybody else does. This idea that this represents everybody, it does not. This crazy behavior does not represent everybody, but it's getting the attention to where it looks like it represents everybody.
I think you're right. I think you said it beautifully. It's interesting about life. Those things in life, those things that become tolerated, then soon become acceptable, and then soon become celebrated. And it's just a pattern of life, of human nature. If we accept something, right, over time, if we tolerate something, over time it'll become acceptable. We won't notice it. And then over time, it'll become normalized and celebrated ultimately. So we've got a mess. It is nauseating what's going on. If your listeners want to know, is what I see on television really going on? Indeed it is.
Michael Levine, he's the author of the book, Broken Windows, Broken Business, How the Smallest Remedies Reap the Biggest Rewards. And we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you, my friend.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Bill Crane is here with me right now, and Bill, a lot happening this week. We have this. We had the Georgia GOP convention last week, and then we have, a real test of law enforcement that may be coming up this weekend. We have the LA riots happening now, and there's been some kind of breakout of riots on Buford Highway and protests and people being arrested in Georgia and in other places around the country. So your thoughts on all of that?
Would you like to start? There's quite a smorgasbord there. Where would you like to start? Did you go to Dalton?
I did not go to Dalton. I had a family event to go to that I went to instead. So
I would say you were blessed to not be there from what I heard. I guess starting there first, if the Georgia Republican Party wants to maintain its majority, and I believe they do, and carry the constitutional offices we've seen them carry, the governor's office, pick back that Senate seat up, it cannot be a party that requires a litmus test for membership. And I'm just going to say it. Excluding or attempting to exclude, it won't stand up. It's a non-binding resolution. It doesn't have the force of law. But trying to exclude a Republican Secretary of State from seeking that office or another office as a Republican when he's looking at both the governor's and Senate races, given his performance in office, without any incriminating faults, other than his denial that there was an election stolen in 2020, is insane to me. And then you couple that with censuring our House Speaker John Burns, following having three governors of Georgia back to back censured over a period of years by their own party, and making a hero out of State Senator Colton Moore, the clown cars running that party. I'm not speaking of the chair.
But let's tell the truth here. 10% of people go to those meetings, and elections are won by the 90%. And you're right. It has gotten, there's a term for it that Barry Weiss has coined called the woke right. The problem we got, we just defeated the woke left, but we've got to make sure we don't usher in a woke right.
Yeah, I won't name names on the air. You and I both know a lot of them, but I don't understand where their logic is, how think they can broaden the party's base, how they think they can bring in minorities, how they think they can bring in young people, putting on a show like that.
Yeah, and they actually did do something pretty historic. An 18-year-old young man was elected to a statewide position, African-American young man.
Shelley Winter.
And I met him at a debate that I moderated, and he is a sharp kid. And so I was glad to see somebody like that. Now, there's some other breaking news that came, is that Elon Musk stunned the world by giving President Trump an apology, saying, I regret my posts. Some of my posts about President Trump last week, they went too far. So
I wonder if he wrote it himself or he had a little help. But yeah, given all the contracts he has with the federal government, I'm not surprised.
Well, short and sweet.
Really
and look, they're going to be fine. It was just, and Elon was wrong in this case. Okay, it's not, he's a brilliant man, and never in the history of the world has a man with his kind of intelligence been under the kind of scrutiny. Einstein wasn't, none of the, I'm sure all those guys, Oppenheimer, they were all weird as can be. Nobody saw him every day. That's what the difference is.
True.
Yeah.
Social media has changed the landscape.
So, let's talk a little bit about Los Angeles. Of course, it looks like it's finally getting a little bit under control, but not after a lot of small businesses have been destroyed, which means people's livelihood and the families of people that work for them are hurt. Gavin Newsom, really has become the George Wallace of the 21st century because he's defying federal law. And they had to call in the National Guard. They've done that in 3 or 4 cases over our history when governors defy federal law. And that's what was happening here. So it looks like it's getting a little better, but there is this talk about protests all around the country this weekend. And there was a little dust up yesterday on Beaufort Highway where 8 people were arrested and fireworks were shot at police and that kind of thing. So are you hearing anything about that?
Yeah, I live in DeKalb County, and Beaufort Highway is part of the city. The part that where they had the protests kind of straddled the cities of Brookhaven and Chamblee, so there were some jurisdictional issues. But the DeKalb County PD, Brookhaven PD, and Chamblee PD all responded, and basically you had what started out as kind of a spontaneous rally in a retail area spill out onto the highway and close the highway, and it's a major core. It's a state highway. It's State Highway 23. Closed the highway for a number of hours, and as it got dark, people got rowdy, and there was fireworks, and there were, I understand, some Molotov cocktails. No one seriously injured, but the potential was there. It reminded me of the beginnings of the summer of 2020 racial justice protests that started with peaceful marches that then got out of hand. And, of course, paid protesters and other people coming in to rabble-rouse are brought in. And Brian Kemp very cleverly and very early brought in the National Guard after the State Patrol building had been attacked, after there were attempts to get onto the property of the governor's mansion, and they brought in the National Guard downtown and kept them in Centennial Park. And over a period of days, working with, though Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms wasn't immediately agreeable, the violent aspect of looting, the tearing up of downtown businesses was quelled. And I think that's what will happen in Los Angeles, much to the chagrin of the governor, who seems to want to see his city go the way of Portland or Seattle or,
Well, and to your point, in Los Angeles, and we certainly want to get to the bottom of it here too, I mean, there were pallets of cinder blocks delivered to an address so that they would have rocks to throw at cars. There were pallets of breastplates that would block rubber bullets. There were pallets of gas masks, boxes of gas masks. There's money behind this. And Stacey Abrams got on. No, that's okay. Stacey Abrams got on social media doing this almost promotion for these events this weekend on video, talking about standing up and protesting and all this stuff. They have not gotten the message. They have not gotten the message.
When the protests occurred here in Atlanta, I think it was either day 3 or day 4, we put in place a curfew, particularly aimed at younger folks, but that was not exactly being followed. And I was watching on Chopper 2. I'm a consultant and do on-air contributor work for WSB, and I was in the newsroom that night, and I'm watching the live feed of Chopper 2 looking down on Centennial Olympic Park. And out of nowhere, literally almost kind of out of alleyways, came a pack of 15 or 20 protesters, head to toe, covered in black and masks, because it was during the pandemic, piled up wood debris they'd been hauling from everywhere, covered it with accelerant, lit it on fire, and the shift changed very quickly, and the Georgia State Patrol and the National Guard told everybody to disperse at 9:30 or 10 o'clock or they'd start arrests. The fire was the worst of it, and that night was on the night that they broke in all the windows and knocked out all the stores. But those were professionals. They knew what they were doing. They in a matter of moments, they piled a stockpile of scrap wood that was probably about 5 feet tall. They covered it with accelerant. They lit it on fire, and then they ran away. That's not weekend protesters or a young kid who thinks the country's heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and that's what we have to warn against, the rent-a-protesters. And I remember as far back as the Iraq War in 2003, there was a protest in Washington, and I went up. I paid my own way along with several other people from Georgia. But on the plane were a whole bunch of young people, and I happened to recognize one of them as a friend of one of my kids. And so I went up and talked to him, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, we got a free trip to D.C. They paid our airfare. They're giving us a per diem, all this stuff, and we just have to show up at this rally." That is not grassroots. You know what I mean? No,
it's not. And the fact that some media outlets will not acknowledge that goes on is sort of beyond me, because it doesn't take a lot of probing to figure that out.
It doesn't. So what do you see as, obviously with the Georgia GOP set aside, let's talk for a minute about what didn't happen, and that was Burt Jones did not announce for governor, but he did speak, and I've seen his presence kind of escalate a little bit. Do you have any inside information on whether that's going to happen sooner or later?
I know they're getting a little nervous about Marjorie Taylor Greene possibly getting in the governor's race, and I think that would not be helpful to his efforts in campaign. It would be helpful to Chris Carr. And I do know that people around Brad Raffensperger, there was some polling done, and he hasn't made his mind up yet, but he's going to get into one of those two races.
Well, that should be interesting.
The Senate or the governor's race.
Yeah, absolutely. He'll get into one of those two. And, of course, Derek Dooley had said that he's got some interest in running. He would be kind of an outsider candidate, but with a lot of or some name recognition.
I love that family, and I know Derek. I'll just say he's not his father or his mother in terms of Georgia.
Yes.
Network and name ID. He's known and the family's beloved, but Vince Dooley didn't run for governor because they realized the difficulty of that.
Well, people must have been a little bit nervous about it because somebody put out a fake press release that basically said he wasn't from Georgia, and people ran with it. And that's the thing I'm doing now. Quite frankly, Bill, I don't go with anything immediately unless it comes from, like an actual government agency announcing it or something. I always check it out
Georgia.
to make sure it's not AI, because there's so much fake stuff out there.
He's more telegenic than his dad. He's more charming like his mom, but and the girls are known well, Deanna and her sister, but it's such a big state, and that runway is so short from where we're looking at right now to the primary.
Absolutely. Bill Crane, thanks for being with me today.
Take care, Martha.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.